Alright everybody, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be ranking every season in Chapter 1 from worst to best. Now, of course, these are my own opinions, so if you think something should be a little bit higher or a little bit lower, leave a comment down below. I'd love to see what you guys think. And just quickly, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. We're almost at 1,000 subscribers, so any help would be greatly appreciated. But hey, with all that out of the way, let's just dive straight into the video. And starting off this list is easily the worst season in Chapter 1 with Season 3. Listen guys, I'm sorry, but this season commits the worst act imaginable that a Fortnite season could ever possibly do. And that isn't even being unfair, it's not being boring. No, in my opinion, there is literally no reason for this season to even exist. It was just so incredibly mediocre. It's the definition of this could have been an update. Like, I mean, this season, it's infamous for only ever having one map change. And while I think Lucky Landing is a good point of interest, it definitely wasn't enough to carry an entire season on its back. And especially when you're comparing it to some of the best locations ever added to the game, I'm sorry, it just isn't going to do anything for this season's position on this list. But of course, the best part about this season didn't even come with anything the season added. It was actually the build-up to Season 4, of course with the meteor in the sky. Now, while this didn't quite start the storyline, it still drove the community absolutely insane. Like, I wasn't even playing the game at that point, but it didn't matter because I was sat there, you know, at my lunch tables theorizing what the meteor was going to hit. Is it going to hit tilted towers? Is it going to hit shifty shafts? Everybody was losing their minds over this thing. It was so fun and it helped kickstart the whole theory side of the community. But even then, I'm sorry guys, it just isn't good enough to get it all too high up on the list. Unfortunately, it is definitely still the worst season in Chapter 1. Nothing really happened in it until the last 2 weeks, and unfortunately, that's why it's sat at the number 10 spot on this list. But hey, you know what? We're going to follow that one up with another really strange season, and it is Season 1. I mean, what could you even say about this that hasn't been said already? It was incredibly early days, you know, it was super simple, you just had to be there, yada da 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 da, you've all heard it before. This season has some serious glazers out there, but even if I ignore them, this season is just a decent season. Now, some people might be wondering, you know, Jazz Vader, why have you put this above Season 3, but, you know, you're going to consider the fact that this was the first ever Fortnite season. There wasn't anything before this. Season 3, on the other hand, it followed up 2 incredible seasons, and it just fell short of both of them. I don't know, Season 1 has always just felt so much more impressive to me. It had kind of like a magical feel to it. Everything felt phenomenal. The art style was at its strongest state. Everything just looked so stunning. The island was beautiful. Now, I will say it was a little bit bare bones, you know, as you all know, and I'm probably sick of hearing at this point. Season 1 didn't have iconic locations like tilted towers and shifty shafts. I mean, it wasn't like there was anything there in these large open spaces. No, that's definitely a weird thing about Season 1. It wasn't afraid to just have massive open fields. And to be honest, I think it added a lot to how the first season felt. You didn't really know how to use the weird building mechanic you've been given, so you had to just try and brave the stretch and try and run across the field without getting shot. It just perfectly added to that nervous feeling that coated this season. Now listen, while there isn't really all too much to talk about outside of that, in terms of like vibes and how this season got you feeling, it was incredible. But at the same time, when you compare it to some of the other seasons on this list, I'm sorry, but you just can't put it above too many seasons, and that's why it's sat at the number 9 spot on this list. But hey, you know what? We're going to follow that one up with a very controversial season with, of course, Season X. Now, I'm sure you guys know why this is down here, so we're actually going to talk about the positives that this season had first. I mean, I literally bring this up every single time I talk about this season, but you just have to bring it up because it was such an insane thing, and a lot of people don't even really consider how insane this was. You had an entire brand new point of interest every single week, with modifiers attached to it to make these locations even more interesting. Like, the amount of content we were getting was absolutely insane. We haven't even seen anything like it since, and I don't think we ever will again. It should have been goated, and it should have been in the top 3 on this list. You know what? Even in the top 3 of all time. But unfortunately, there was one single item that completely ruined the season, and of course, I'm talking about the mechs. Like, it was so unbalanced. How did this thing even get added to the game? To think this thing was ever moving the way it was on day one and could farm mats was just insane. And it just completely ruined what should have been one of the best seasons in Fortnite history. I gotta say, with this season, I think I have the same opinion with this as I do with Chapter 5, in the way that I think that this season had the potential to be something amazing, but they just kind of fumbled it on one major front, and it completely ruined the entire season, and that's why it's sat at the number 8 spot on this list. But hey, following that one up is another incredibly mediocre season in my opinion, and it is Chapter 1 Season 9. I'm sorry, this was just such a mediocre season. Nothing happened in it. I'm sorry, but the map changes in this season completely carried it. There was nothing going on. Like, I mean, you had Mega Mall, which is literally one of my favorite locations in Fortnite history. It's such a fun concept for a location. I can't believe we haven't had something like it ever since. You know, just a huge shopping center to walk around in. And then, of course, you also had Neo Tilted, which I actually liked a lot. I know a lot of people like to dog on that POI, but it was super unique. There was so much going on in it, and especially the Continental building was really, really cool. The fact that you couldn't actually fight in there when you were playing the Wix Bounty mode was such a cool little detail, and a very sneaky way to test out the Season X Rift Zone mechanic. Now listen, I gotta say the loot pool of this season was... it was a little bit rough. I can't even deny that myself. I mean, you had items like the Combat AR and the Combat Shotgun, which, you know, they're not exactly the best items in Fortnite history. And then you also had the Burst SMG. Hey, listen, there's a reason this thing isn't in the top 5 on this list. Even though this season did end off on a banger live event, honestly, one of the best we've ever had. Honestly, overall, it was just a really forgettable season, and unfortunately, I just don't have all that much to say about it. But you know what, moving on from this point, we're gonna go straight to the season at the number 6 spot on this list, which is, of course, Season 5. Now listen, when it comes to this season, you know, we kind of have to address the elephant in the room, which was the addition of the desert biome. I mean, this was insane at the time. This was the first ever major map change, and it just set a precedent for how big the map changes in the season had to be. Like, this was huge at the time. If you didn't play this, you wouldn't understand how much people were freaking out over this. Like, there were people wanting Moisty Maya back. Some people were like refusing to land at this place. Some people were only landing at this place. Nobody knew what to do with a map change this big, and it was just legendary for the time. You also had some insanely iconic items like the grappler and the shockwaves, as well as items like the heavy sniper and the double barrel shotgun. But even then, that wasn't even the most iconic thing added to this season, because obviously around halfway through this season, we had the addition of Kevin the Cube, which, while cool in of itself, I could go on a whole tirade about how cool Kevin was as a concept. With the addition of Kevin the Cube, you could actually track it across matches and see it move in real time, which I think is huge for Fortnite, and without this tiny addition, we wouldn't have had things like the Mothership abductions in Chapter 2 Season 7, and anything to do with the Dark Voyager in Chapter 7 Season 1. However, there's one big reason why this season isn't up there, because of course this season had one major flaw, which people still shudder when they hear it today, being the spray meta. Because of course, at the beginning of the season, you had the Prime P90, you had the drum gun, you had the submachine gun. All of these items were just shredding through opponent, the damage was through the roof, and it was just really bad for the game. Because of this, at the time, this season was considered one of the worst to ever come out, and it was pretty much entirely because of this. In retrospect, this season is a really good season, but I'm sorry, simply due to the issues with balancing this season had, unfortunately, it doesn't quite meet the mark. But hey, you know what? We're going to follow that one up with another season that was controversial at the time, but now looking back at it is pretty decent. And of course, I'm talking about Season 6. Listen, I've held this opinion since the original Season 6, because obviously I did play it a little bit. This entire season just kind of felt like Season 5 Part 2, just a little bit more refined and a little bit more balanced. It was what Season 5 should have been all the way through, but at its core, it was still kind of just Season 5 again, so I can't really place it too much higher than the season it was based off. I mean, looking at the loophole, of course, you had some really, really great items, like you have the heavy assault rifle with the 98 headshot, you had the epic and gold pumps, you had the 6-shooter, which, even though it wasn't exactly the best thing in the world, it was still decently usable. It was definitely a less chaotic loot pool, definitely a lot slower and a lot more punchy, and it brought around a much needed reset after the chaos that came with the previous season. Now, unfortunately, this season does kind of fall into the same trap that Chapter 1 Season 3 did, where it only really added like one new POI to the season, which of course was the floating cube island. But to be fair, I think the pure concept of this location is just so cool that it kind of made up for the fact that it was only one location. Like, the idea of a floating POI that moves from match to match was actually incredible, and I think it's such a shame that they've never really tried it again. And to be honest, when you consider all of this together, with this season kind of just feeling like Season 5 Part 2, and with the minimal map changes, and with the albeit really good but also really small loot pool changes, I just can't shake the feeling that if this season was made today, this season would have been made into a mini season. And that's why I've put it at the number 5 spot on this list. It's perfectly in the middle, it's perfectly mediocre, I wouldn't change anything about it, but it just didn't impress me all that much. But you know what, we're going to move on to the next season on this list, and not only is it one that actually impressed me, it's one that blew me out of the water with how much it added to the game, and of course, it's Chapter 1 Season 2. Hey, listen, I know, we've got to talk about the map changes. I mean, literally everything that can be said about these map changes has been said already by a million different people. It completely fixed the empty field issue that plagued Chapter 1 Season 1, and it gave so much more life to the left side of the map, because if you remember, it only really ever had Pleasant Park, Greasy Grove, and Flush Factory. But even looking past the obvious, this season didn't just flesh out the map, it fleshed out the loot pool. Seriously, you had some of the most iconic items in Fortnite history come out. You had the minigun, you had the chug jug, you had the boogie bomb, you had the small shield potion. Like, hello, you didn't even have a small shield potion until now? I could keep going. Like, you had the crossbow, the damage trap. So many of these items changed the game forever. And you know what? While we're talking about changing the game forever, you also had the addition of the entire battle pass. It's insane this wasn't in the game day one. It's such a core part of the game at this point in its lifespan, but it was actually a fairly late addition to the game, all things considered. Now listen, while this season definitely did away with a lot of the magical feel that Season 1 did, it did still keep that cartoony vibe, while also making sure to give itself its own identity. It just felt great to play. There were so many incredible items, so many incredible changes, and that's why it sat at the number 4 spot on this list. But of course, kicking off the top 3 on this list, starting off at the number 3 spot, is of course Chapter 1 Season 7. Now listen, if there was one word I could use to describe this season, it is nostalgia. It just had the vibes, dude. It had the vibes. Now listen, I definitely have a bias towards this season because it was my first ever season. But even looking past that, because obviously we got to replay it recently in the OG mode, this was definitely the last season where it felt like classic Chapter 1 in terms of loot pool complexity. Like, you had no crazy items, you had no mythics, it was just pure guns, pure grenades, and maybe a couple of wacky items that weren't overpowered, but they were still really fun. But of course, there was kind of one major issue with this season. Of course, you do have to mention the planes. These things were insane. You could literally level tilted with these on launch, but you know, eventually they got balanced out, and you also had a couple more vehicles added to the game, kind of stop everybody taking these every single match. I mean, going back to talking about the season itself, you know, let's not get sidetracked. You've got to talk about the theming that this season had, which of course was a Christmas theme. It just gave the season an incredibly strong identity. I miss when seasons were themed around the actual real-life seasons that were taking place across. You had Season 6's Halloween themes, and then you had Chapter 2 Season 3's summer theming. It was just so cozy. Everything was perfect. It's one of the most fun seasons in the game's history, let alone Chapter 1. But as you guys can see, there's 2 more seasons on this list that I just think are slightly better. And of course, coming up next at the number 2 spot in this list, it's certainly the best out of the original 4 seasons, and it is Chapter 1 Season 4. Seriously, what a phenomenal season. Listen, I know I throw that word around a lot, but it was so fun. Like, you had some of the best map changes across the game's lifespan, with, of course, the changing of Dusty Depot to Dusty Divot with the meteor hitting it, which would go on to properly kickstart the Fortnite storyline into full production. And you also had tons of incredible mini locations, like the film sets and the superhero bases you could find at each side of the map. And with that as well, while we're on the topic of superheroes, we also had the first ever collaboration in Fortnite history, and whether it was for the worst or the best, you guys kind of got to decide that. But to be fair, I think this one was a certified banger. Like, the Infinity Gauntlet mode is one of the best LTMs we've ever had. And of course, going back to the actual season itself, we also had an incredible loot pool. Unlike the previous 3 seasons in Chapter 1, this season actually gave the loot pool a little bit of spice, it gave it a little bit of a kick. You know, you had some really saucy items like the drum gun and the dual pistols, which I think are both incredible items and definitely deserve to be in the Hall of Fame of Fortnite items if there ever was one. And to top everything else off, it ended with the first ever live event, which literally changed the game forever, if not the gaming industry forever, and it just blows my mind to think just how much this season added. But, as you guys may have noticed, it's not at the #1 spot. So, what is? And hey, sitting all the way at the top of the list, all the way at the #1 spot, it's the one, it's the only, it is Chapter 1 Season 8. I struggled really hard whether to put Season 8 or Season 4 at the #1 spot on this list. But when I was looking at them both side by side, I realized I just preferred this season over the former. I mean, hey, listen, if I had a smidge of nostalgia bias for Season 7, Season 8 is on a whole other level. This season was my first full season, and it was easily some of the most fun I've ever had with a game. You had the likes of the boom bow, the flintlock pistol, the shadow grenade. Come on guys, the fact that all of these items were in the game all at once, and were of course accompanied by the incredible Chapter 1 base loot pool, just goes to show how goated this season truly was. And don't even get me started on the map changes. The prime Chapter 1 jungle was a joy to explore, and it was a joy to play in. And yeah, talking about that, again, I've stated this literally every single time I bring the season up, and that is that I believe earnestly that the Season 8 map on day 1 was the best version of the Chapter 1 map that we ever got. I mean, combining the best ever version of Loot Lake with the snow biome in its prime made for such a phenomenal map, and it's definitely a huge reason as to why I think this was easily the best season in Chapter 1. It just felt incredible to play all around, the map was stunning, the loot pool was incredible, everything felt balanced, it just had that special feeling to it, and that's why it sat all the way at the top of the list, all the way at the #1 spot. Alright everybody, thank you so much for sticking all the way till the end of the video. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Like I said, we're so close to 1,000 subscribers, so if you could just click that button, it would seriously mean the world to me. But hey, at the end of the day, all you really gotta do is stay safe, drink some water, and have a fantastic day. Bye bye!